Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about some new products from RMS. So the first one is their new liquid concealer, which is called the Revitalize Hydra Concealer. And I have been liking this product an awfully lot. And I feel that it has been performing really well, even in comparison to my Sarah Creal Concealer, which I think has been really terrific and which has gotten really good reviews from many people that are really picky about concealers and in a lot of cases that are getting a bit older. And so what I wanted to do in this video is just to talk about the new RMS concealer and then to compare it on my face to the Sarah Creal concealer so that we can see which one we like better. And then in addition, RMS has introduced 4 new products in their shade that is called Crystal Slipper. And so this is a shade of blush that I really like for myself on my own peach colored skin. And so I decided to pick up all 4 of these new items in this Crystal Slipper shade. And so there is a lip to cheek, which is a cream blush, and there is a luminizer, which is a cream highlighter, and then there is a shimmery eyeshadow that comes in this little tube, and there is a lip gloss. And so I will be trying all of those on for you as well and comparing that to the Crystal Slipper that is in the powder form. And so as you probably know, RMS was founded by a really famous makeup artist named Rosemary Swift. And she is in her late 60s, and just a couple of months ago she did a video on a YouTube channel that is called Glam Girl Gabby, where she did a makeover and talked about all of the techniques that she tends to use. And I thought that that video was really interesting and that Glam Girl Gabby did look really pretty at the end. And it has been pretty popular, so last I checked there were 230,000 views on that video. But one thing that I did notice was that throughout the video, Rosemary Swift did talk a lot about how the techniques that she was using were really appropriate for women who were getting older. And Glam Girl Gabby, I think, is only in her 30s. And so I thought that what might be interesting would be for me to try out the specific techniques that Rosemary Swift was promoting in that video to see how well they worked on me. And so I am 61 years old and I have dry skin, and I do have very sensitive skin, and I have found that the RMS products have worked really well for me in terms of creating looks that I like and in terms of not irritating my skin. But I thought that following Rosemary Swift's techniques really carefully would be interesting to see how I looked if I did that. And so first, a little bit of information about me. As I say, I am 61 years old and I have sensitive skin and dry skin, and I've never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery or even lasers. And so I am looking for makeup that can help me to look a little bit fresher and a little bit healthier and maybe a little bit happier or maybe even a little bit younger. And so that is why I am especially interested in people who are focusing their attention on helping women who are getting a bit older to look good. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my very sensitive skin, and I know that those ingredients tend to be really irritating for other people as well. And so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel, and it is the case that none of the RMS products include those kinds of ingredients. It is designed to be a clean beauty company, and I think that they have been pretty strict in terms of sticking to that, and so I am happy about that. And before we get started, I wanted to also mention my Facebook group. So this is called 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Peterson, and the idea of the group is to talk about all aspects of maintaining a healthy and attractive appearance as we get older. And so I hope that you will think about joining us there. And so let's talk first about this new concealer. And so this is supposed to be a medium coverage concealer that is high performance and has skincare benefits. And it comes in 26 shades, and it is made in Italy, and it has a usage life of 12 months. And this is a plastic container, and the tip on this concealer, rather than being a doe foot, it is a little brush. And in terms of the ingredients, this concealer does have quite a lot of different kinds of oil in it. So it first of all includes shea butter and jojoba oil and sunflower oil and squalane. And then in addition, there are some synthetic oil derivatives. So these are from olive oil and coconut oil and glycerin. There are 2 fermented ingredients in this, and I always do like to see fermented ingredients on a label because that tends to be something that seems to be good for my skin. And it has caffeine in it, so that is supposed to be depuffing. And so especially in the under eye area, if you have eye bags, then the caffeine may help with that. And I do think caffeine is helpful for me with regard to eye bags. And then it has a bunch of herbs in it that are things that Rosemary Swift tends to use in a lot of the RMS products. And so these include St. John's wort, horsetail, country sarsaparilla, turmeric, ashwagandha, licorice, olive leaf, eyebright, green tea, pomegranate, aloe, and marigold. And a lot of these ingredients are actually organic. And so that is another thing that I like to see on an ingredient list. And I'm not seeing any problematic ingredients at all. There is licorice root extract, and for some reason EWG gives that mildly elevated rating. I think it's a 4 or a 5, but I have never had any issues with licorice extract myself. And so they are saying that this is supposed to be a crease-proof concealer and that it is supposed to be nourishing and hydrating, and that it is developed so that it can be color correcting depending on what shade you use. And one thing that Rosemary Swift does suggest is that at least when she is using the concealer, she will use multiple different shades. And so she will use one under the eyes for color correcting and one for the rest of the face, or maybe more than one for the rest of the face. And I have just purchased one so far, and the one that I purchased is in the shade CO5. So I picked out the shade that I thought would be best for my under eyes. It's a little bit more on the pink side, and I do think that this has been a nice shade for me, and I think it's matched the rest of my skin okay as well. And there are 26 shades, and I do see quite a few of these for darker skin tones. There are 5 shades that are listed as being for deep skin, and there are 5 shades that are listed for being for olive skin. And the lightest shade is an olive neutral, and so I think it may be the case that there are some people out there that may be really excited about that, because in a lot of cases, people that do have really, really light skin that is leaning olive or have a hard time finding any products that are appropriate for them, because a lot of products go really orange for them. And then there is also an olive shade for really dark skin, and so it seems to me that there is at least a possibility for a lot of people that have a hard time getting a good shade of foundation or concealer to find a good one in this particular line. And I have personally found this concealer to be working really, really well for me. I've been using it for over a week, I guess. And in the past, before last year, there really were not any concealers at all out there that I did really like. And that did change somewhat last year, and there were a number of concealers that were released that worked for me better than they had in the past. And so the one that has been working particularly well for me is this Sarah Creal concealer. And then there were a couple of other concealers that were released last year that I also liked enough to continue to use, at least in terms of having products in the container, but that I was a little bit less inclined to purchase. And so one of these was the Say concealer, which I actually was really kind of surprised at how much I liked this one. And then I also liked the new Westman Atelier concealer. And the Iris and Romeo concealer was also not too bad. And in terms of color correctors, I did actually like this Caloray color corrector. And I think that all of those were really breakthrough in terms of the fact that I was able to use them, especially in my eye area, without it looking like I was much older and that my wrinkles were much worse. And as I say, I think that the Sarah Creal Concealer performed the best for me of these, and that an awful lot of other people, especially those who are getting older, have also really liked this particular one. And this concealer seems to me to be very similar to the RMS concealer in a lot of respects. So it also has caffeine in it. It also has some fermented ingredients and some quality oils in it and some skincare ingredients. And this particular concealer is now available in 16 shades, so it launched with fewer shades than that. And so I think a lot of people, when it launched, were not able to get a good match for their skin. But now there are more shades, and so hopefully there will be a lot more people that can get a good shade match, although the RMS concealer definitely is offering a lot more shades, and I think that the shades look like they are maybe so dialed in that a lot of people should be able to benefit from that. Now, if we look at the price, these concealers have a bit of different pricing strategies. So on the surface, it looks like the Sarah Creal Concealer is more expensive because the total price for that is $58, whereas the RMS Concealer is only $35. But the difference here is that the Sarah Creal Concealer has much more product in the container. So it has 9 milliliters of product, whereas the RMS Concealer only has 5 milliliters of product. And so if you calculate it out on a per milliliter basis, the RMS one is actually more expensive, slightly more expensive, but it is more expensive, of $7 a milliliter versus $6.44 a milliliter for the Sarah Creal. And so therefore, if you're sure that you're going to like this Sarah Creal Concealer and you're sure you're going to use it, then that may be just as good of a deal or a better deal. But on the other hand, it is a bigger initial investment, and $58 for a concealer is quite a lot compared to almost all the other concealers that are on the market. Now, one thing about RMS is that they do tend to have discounts, and you can always use my own discount code, which is LisaP20, and get 20% off if you buy it from the RMS website, or if you wait, there may be better sales than 20% from time to time on the RMS website as well. On the other hand, I have never seen Sarah Creal do any kind of a discount sale. The one other distinguishing factor between these two products is that the Sarah Creal product is in glass, and it just has a standard doe foot applicator, and the RMS concealer is in plastic, and that one has that little brush on the end. And I've actually been kind of liking that little brush. I never had a problem with using a doe foot, but I think that the brush is kind of a nice thing too. And so now let's try out some of Rosemary Swift's makeup techniques on my own skin. And so Rosemary Swift is a makeup artist who has worked with models for print publications a lot. And so she was especially well known for having worked for Victoria's Secret. And so she worked with a lot of really famous models. And she said that when they moved to digital, that she was able to look at the models' faces really blown up on computer screens. And she realized that things that she thought were looking really good in print were not looking as natural when she moved into digital, and so she adopted some different kinds of techniques to help the makeup to look even more natural on the skin. And that is one thing that I do like about the RMS line, is that I do feel like in a lot of cases I can make it look like I'm not wearing makeup at all and I'm just looking prettier. And at the beginning, especially, a lot of models were really enthusiastic about these products because historically makeup tended to be pretty bad for the skin and do have some problematic ingredients in it. And especially all of the original products that Rosemary Swift offered were natural products with organic oils and things that were really, really good for the skin. And one of the models that was the most enthusiastic about this was Giselle Bundchen, and so she did talk about this product a lot and to let a lot of people know about it during the early days. And so in the video, Rosemary Swift talked about the importance of skin prep, and she did spend a bit of time at the beginning of the video putting on some of their skin prep products. So they do have some new products, and one of those is called the Super Serum Hydrating Mist, which contains some minerals in it. And then there is a Kakadu Beauty Oil, which does have a lot of oils in it that I do believe are really, really good for the skin. And she put some of that oil on Gabby's skin, even though Gabby has oilier skin. And she said that even if you have oily skin, that putting a little bit of really high quality oil in it can help to balance the skin. Now, the issue for me is that most of the skincare products for RMS do contain a variety of different scents in them, and they are natural scents, and some of them are organic, but I do believe that I react to some of those, and so I haven't actually purchased those products. And in general, I do feel like I do much better if I don't use any kind of scent ingredients, including essential oils or natural processed fragrances, in my skincare at all, and that if I just use things that are unscented. And so what I did instead is to use the new product that I have from Sarah Creal. And so this is called Moisture Source by Phase Brightening Essence. And so this does have a number of skincare ingredients in it, and it includes some oil in it and then also some non-oil ingredients. And I think that my skin has done well with this. You know, I have this very large bottle of it, and this was really expensive. I think it was $95. And I've used this at least a few dozen times, and my skin seems to like it just fine. And even so, I've used almost none of this bottle up. So I think if I use this every day, maybe my skin would really like it. It does supposed to have these peptides in it, and peptides, I believe, do tend to be good for the skin, depending on which ones they are, maybe. And so I have liked this one. What I have found, though, is that recently they did come out with a mini size of this, which is $35, and I suspect that if you got that mini size, that it would last you for a really long time also, because this one, I've heard from many different people, you do use it up very slowly because you're only using a few drops. And so my feeling is that the same kind of moisture that Rosemary Swift put on Gabby's skin is similar to what I'm getting when I put this particular product on my skin. So it's not a heavy cream or anything. It's just really light products that provide just a little bit of hydration and moisturizing to the skin without it being greasy or slimy. And then the next thing that she did was to curl the eyelashes, and she did put quite a bit of effort into curling the eyelashes and in talking about the importance of putting the eyelash curler straight against the eyes so that the entire eyelashes go straight up rather than go over to the side. And I have never used an eyelash curler in my life, and I feel like my lashes are very short and very delicate, and I suspect it wouldn't really make much of a difference if I used an eyelash curler, and I'm a little bit hesitant to purchase one and use one. Maybe I should give it a try, but I haven't done that yet, and I didn't buy an eyelash curler for this video. Rosemary Swift said that she liked the MAC eyelash curler, and so if you're looking for one, then that might be one to consider, or maybe that's one that I would consider. And then right after she curled the eyelashes, then she put on mascara. And so her mascara is called RMS Beauty Straight Up Mascara. And this is a regular mascara. It's not a tubing mascara, and it is only available in black. And I think that one of the things that this mascara is most known for is that it is not irritating. And I have heard a number of people suggest that even though a lot of mascaras do irritate their eyes, that this one has not been irritating for them at all. So I do think that that is really important. And I have used it from time to time myself, and it certainly has been fine for me in terms of not being irritating. And I do feel like this is one of those mascaras that tends to get kind of clumpy, and that therefore that if I want it to look good, that I need to get out my spoolie and to brush it through my eyelashes in order to separate them and make it look more natural. And so Rosemary Swift did acknowledge in this video that you really need to put a little bit of effort into separating the lashes out with the little spoolie. and that if you don't do that, you can kind of get like a little bit of spider leg type looks, and doesn't look natural. And that is not a look that I like, and that is not a look that she says that she likes either. And I do think that a lot of the reason that they have the mascara that they have is because it is so gentle for people that have sensitive eyes. But she did say that there were some other things about this mascara that she thought were really important and that were really unique about this formula. And so one of those is the suggestion that after you've put on the mascara that you can then use your eyelash curler to curl the eyelashes more. And so I think that that is really interesting, and I had never seen anyone do that before. And in terms of applying the mascara, when I had used it in the past, or in general when I'm applying any kind of mascara, what I tend to do is just to use it to darken the tips of my lashes. So I do have eyelashes that are very, very light, and so I feel like if I don't use any mascara that it looks like, almost like I don't have eyelashes at all. And so I do think it's helpful to put just a little bit of mascara on the tips of my eyelashes, and that if I can do it lightly enough that it will look fairly natural, but it will look like somebody who actually does have eyelashes as opposed to not having any at all. But what she is suggesting is that in addition to putting a little bit on the tips, that you try to get in and to put as much as possible way down near the root of the eyelashes where the eyelashes meet the skin. And she says that if you can do that, then the lashes won't go down as easily and that they will look like they are going up. And so that does seem to be something that's really important to her, to have the eyelashes go up in the air. I've never found that I even necessarily like that look that much. In terms of the eyelashes going straight up, I feel like that may open the eyes up, but it also makes the eyes look like they are a little bit less natural to me, and that it looks more like that Cupid doll type of a look. And so I still am not sure that I really want to buy an eyelash curler, but for Rosemary Swift, she does seem to think that that lashes going up in the air seems to be really, really important to her. But in this video footage, I did try to put as much of the mascara way down by the roots and then to kind of brush the eyelashes so that maybe they would go up a little bit more than usual. I don't know that that was very successful, though. And then I did use the spoolie to go through it, as I always do when I use this particular mascara. And then the next product that she talked about was their liquid highlighter, and this is called the RMS Supernatural Radiance Serum. It is SPF 30. Of course, if you were going to get SPF 30, that would mean that you were going to be putting a whole quarter teaspoon of this on your face, and I don't think anyone would ever do this, so I think that the amount of sun protection that you are likely to be getting from this would be minimal, but a little bit is better than none. And so she used on Gabby's face the combination of the light version and the medium one, and I have lighter skin, so I am using the light version. And what she says that it is supposed to be providing some luminosity and some moisture to your face in general, and to be a preparation for whatever kind of makeup you're going to put on. And so in the past, I have been really reluctant to try out this product, and the reason is because it has a number of scent ingredients in it, including rose geranium oil on the ingredient list, and so I didn't actually even try it out until very recently when I went to a Blue Mercury store, and they did have this there, and I did decide just on a whim, because I saw it in this video, that I would try it out on my skin just to see if it irritated it. And I was really surprised that this did not irritate my skin at all. And so I don't know why that is, but it really doesn't smell like anything to me. So maybe it has all those scent ingredients in them, but maybe it's very, very small amounts of it. And so I decided to go ahead and pick this up and to use it just for the video. I do really like the way that it looks on my skin. I think I have a lot of these different liquid highlighters, and I do think that this one is really attractive, and so I would be willing to use it again in the future. But I think that I wouldn't put too much stock in that SPF 30, though. I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference. And I do feel like my skin looks pretty after I put this on, and it looks fairly natural. It's not a super shiny glow, but I think it looks very pretty and just a little bit more hydrated and shimmery. And one of the most popular products that RMS offers is their UnCoverup Concealer. And so these were among the original products that RMS introduced when they started the company 30 years ago or so. And so these are cream concealers, and they come in a little pot, and they are all natural oils from botanicals, and there are not any synthetic ingredients in them. And they have been really, really popular. They are, however, products that seem to work a lot better on dry skin. And for people, especially if you have oilier skin, a lot of those people do tend to think that they don't hold up as well as some of the concealers that they have liked. And so when I was first getting into makeup 4 or 5 years ago, I did use these as one of the products that I started with, and I did feel like compared to most of the things that were on the market at the time that these were a lot better, and that as time has gone on, people have released more and more different kinds of concealers and concealing products, and that some of those have worked for me as well, or maybe better than the ones from RMS, but I think it's been interesting in this video to see exactly how Rosemarie Swift is using it and to see what kind of a look I can get with that. And so what she suggests is that when she puts this on, she suggests using only a very small amount of it to start out with, and to just use that to cover over the most problematic dark spots under the eyes, but not to try to gob it on. And so this includes coconut oil and castor oil and jojoba oil and cocoa butter in it. And it does have that castor oil in it, and I think as a result of that, there is some potential for it to go bad. And there is not any essential oils in it to preserve it. And so within a couple of years, I think you can anticipate that this is going to start to smell rancid, but I have never purchased any that smelled rancid to me right when I got it, or that smelled rancid even within a year. And the shade that I am using is called 00, and this is described as being an ivory shade for fair skin tones, and it's the second lightest shade that they offer. And there are only 16 shades in the UnCoverup Concealer, and so there are not nearly as many shades as there are in this new liquid concealer. And then on the other half of my face, I am using the new liquid concealer, and I am putting this on with the combination of my fingers and with the concealer brush that RMS sells to go along with it. And so this is called the Skin to Skin Concealer Brush number 50C, and they did send this to me for free when I bought the concealer as soon as it was released. But I think that they are sold out of this brush on the website now, so they gave away all the brushes, but maybe they will get some more in soon. And I do think that the brushes that RMS sells in general are very nice quality brushes. I feel really comfortable about these, and a lot of them do have really unique shapes that Rosemarie Swift developed to mimic what it is like when you put the products on with your fingers. And so if you're a person that puts on products with your fingers, then you may not need to buy that many of these brushes, or if you already have a buffing brush, then what I tend to do is just put it on with my fingers and then buff it in with a brush. But in general, I do think that the brushes are very nice. And what I will say is that right off the bat, just putting on the concealer and not anything else over it, that I think both of these sides on me look quite nice. And I don't really see much of a difference. So I'm not really seeing that the side with the liquid concealer is getting more into my wrinkles, which often has been the case in the past with liquid concealers. I feel like both of them are pretty moisturizing for my skin, and that they both look quite similar to one another. Now, I think it may be the case that the liquid concealer will hold up better for some people, or maybe for everyone, but especially for people with oilier skin. But in general, I do think that these are fairly similar to one another in how they look. And then the next product is the RMS Hydra Setting Powder, and this was released last year. And so I have the light shade in this particular product, and she suggests putting on the powder with the puff. And so there is a puff right here in the lid, and so I am able to open the plastic top for this and then put on just a very small amount of this powder. And she said that she really prefers a puff because if you use a brush, what you end up doing usually is powdering where you don't need it and missing the points that the powder is supposed to go. And that if you use a puff, you can just press it very carefully into the areas on your skin where it looks a little bit shiny where you don't want it to be shiny. And another thing that seems to be a theme for Rosemary Swift is to talk about the fact that the oil on the skin is something that you should really protect and almost worship, and that you don't want to powder too much in order to take away that oil, because the oil is actually good for the skin and will keep it from getting crepey looking. Now, in the video, she did talk about the idea that there are two different kinds of powder that RMS makes. So one is an older powder that was called UnPowder, and that one appears to be more drying than this new powder, and I don't see that UnPowder on the website at all. And so if you have more oily skin and you're looking for a drying powder, then you may need to look to another company for that. But this Hydra powder does have a lot of moisturizing ingredients in it. And so it does seem to be particularly well suited for people with drier skin and more mature skin, which is kind of RMS's core customer group, I think. And then the next product that she talked about is one that is called the ReDimension Hydra Dew Luminizer. And this is in a shade that is called Prosecco Fizz. And if you are familiar with the RMS powder blushes or the RMS powder bronzer, then this is the same formula as those, except it is in a champagne color type of a highlighter. And I do think that the blushes and the bronzers have been fantastic for my skin, and they really seem to be very, very popular among really almost everyone that uses them. And so this is a product that has been a little bit overlooked, I think, because a lot of people put this on their skin and they don't feel like it's doing too much, and so they don't quite understand why they should be using it. But she seems to think that this product is really important, and in this look she actually used it a couple of times at different points in the video. And so what she is suggesting that you do with this is to put this on top of the areas of your skin that have discoloration, like the areas under your eyes. So if you look at your eyes after you've put on the concealer and there still are areas that look like they are discolored, then she is suggesting just to put a tiny little bit of this particular product on, either with the brush or with your fingers. And although it is the case that people very often suggest that anything that is shimmery is going to call attention to any kind of texture, she is saying that that is actually not the case with this particular product, and that this will actually calm down those areas of discoloration and actually make the wrinkles or any other kinds of texture look less. And so I did try putting a little bit of this in my under eye area, and I actually kind of do like the way that this looks as well. And then the next step that she did was to use a bit of foundation on the face in general, just to cover over any kind of imperfections that needed to be blurred out. And so for this, for the video, she used the RMS ReEvolve Foundation. And she said that you could use the liquid concealer. Now, the liquid concealer hadn't been released at the time that this video came out, and so she said that she just took a very small amount of this and dabbed it on the areas of the face that needed a little bit of coverage. And then she took a sponge, and this is a damp sponge, and then blurred it out using this sponge. And so the sponge that she has, this is one that comes from RMS, and she said that this is a natural rubber rather than a latex sponge, and that it is designed not to get moldy. In general, my experience with sponges is that I kind of like using a sponge the first time I used it, but then after I use it the first time, then it seems like I really never want to use it again because they do tend to feel yucky to me. And so I am interested to actually wash this sponge and see if it's any better in terms of how it feels to me than other sponges that I've used in the past. But in any case, she put on a little bit of this foundation as a concealer, and she dotted it on the areas of the face that needed some coverage. And then she blurred it out with this damp sponge, and then after that dried, then she put a little bit of more powder on the top on those areas just to get them to blend in with the rest of the face. And then the next thing that they talked about in the video footage was brows. And so RMS only has 2 brow products. They have a brow pencil that is just a plain wooden pencil, and then they have a brow powder. And Glam Girl Gabby has really good brows to begin with, and so they just took the regular brow pencil and they just used that to even it out a little bit. And so what she mostly focused on in the video is suggesting that you don't want your brows to look too harsh, and you don't want them to look too perfect or squared out, because that can be aging. And so for me, I have a different issue, and that is that I have brows that are both very sparse and that are very light. And so I don't feel like powders have helped me at all. And if I just use a regular brow pencil like the one that RMS offers, and I don't do anything else, then I feel like there is so much brow that I am adding that it doesn't look natural, even if I try to take a lot of time and to draw individual hairs on there. It just looks very fake. And so I could do that, and then sometimes if I will add a brow gel over the top of it, then that will add a little bit of actual texture and make it look like it's more of an authentic brow. But what I tend to do instead is to use this Jones Road brow pencil. And so this one works a lot better for me, and the reason is because this one has little fibers in it. And so if I use it only taking like 10 or 15 seconds per brow, it will actually look pretty natural because it looks like I have real hairs in my brows. And then the next thing that she worked on was eyeshadow. And so they have a new product that came out recently that is called the Cashmere Matte Eyelights. And so these come in a little tube, and I have 3 of the shades. And these are designed to provide a matte, basic 1950s inspired matte eyeshadow on your eyes that is just all one color. And so you can either put this on with your fingers or with the little brush. And so the brush that she used for this is her eye polish brush, which looks like this, or I think that my fingers work pretty well as well. And so this is supposed to look like a fairly natural base on your eyes. It might be a little bit darker, and there's not supposed to be a whole lot of it on. It's just supposed to be a really light layer that is supposed to emphasize your eyes a little bit. And then if you want to add some more sparkly eyeshadow, then you can do that over the top of this. So it's kind of like an eye base. And one thing that she said is that especially if you're older, you have hooded eyes, that you want to make sure that you bring that eyeshadow up above the crease. And that is something that I always do with eyeshadow, is to bring it up above the crease so you actually can see that color a little bit and it opens up the eyes a bit. And when I was rewatching the video for the last time, I did notice that she was talking about the idea of taking a really fine brush, like an eyeliner brush, and putting just a little bit of that color underneath the eyes. And that is not something that I did in the video footage, but I think it's an interesting idea, so you could think about doing that. And so personally, I have 3 different shades of this product, and so for the first video footage that I have here, I use one of these on each of my eyes. And so on one eye, I'm using a shade that is called Tundra Taupe, and then the other one is a somewhat darker shade that is called Dusty Trail. And she suggests to get an even look that you start out by putting this in the middle of your eyes, and then you blend it out using a brush or your fingers or both. Now, one thing that I do want to note about these eyelights is that a number of people that I have encountered have said that these have been quite irritating to their eyes. So that seems to be really unusual with regard to the RMS products. Most people do seem to be able to tolerate most of their products. But with regard to these eyelights, I keep hearing from people, especially with these cashmere ones, that they've been problematic. And personally, I haven't had a big problem myself. And I think that especially if I put them on over a concealer, that they seem to be all right for me. But I do feel like there are other products that are out there that are better for my eyes and that I would really prefer to use those. And one similar product that I have really liked is one from Makeup by Mario, and this is called the Master Mattes Long Wear Cream Eyeshadow, and these came out just a couple of months ago too, maybe just slightly after the RMS ones did, and I think that this one has been really good for me, and that even if I put it right on my eyes without any kind of a primer or concealer on my eyes, that this one has gone on really nicely. And it does have an applicator, which I think is somewhat more convenient than putting it on with my fingers with those little tubes. And I do like the way that this looks. And so I think that this is a product that I feel really good about, and I have heard a lot of other people really like this one as well. And I think that the look that you get from it is very similar to the look that the RMS shadow is intended to give. And so what I did today is to put on the Makeup by Mario one in the shade Mauve, and then on the top of that I put a little bit of that Crystal Slipper Eyelights, and so you can see what you think of it. And then the next product that they talked about was the shimmer version of the Eyelights, and so what Rosemary Swift suggested is to just use a little dab of that particular product over the top of the Cashmere ones, and so the idea is that it's just right on top of your eyeball that you're getting a little bit of a highlight there. And I kind of messed it up myself because when I did this I put I think a little bit too much of it on there, and I made it go above my crease of my eyeshadow, and so I think that I'm getting a much more shimmery look than what she gave to Gabby. And I still think it's pretty, and I still think it's wearable by me, but I think that if I had just used it according to the instructions and I had just put a little bit of a dab of highlighter, that would have been much more natural looking. And the color that I am using is called Strobe, and that is supposed to be a champagne mink. And she also suggested putting a little bit on the tear ducts, like right on the inner corner of the eyes, and that is something that I neglected to do, but I think that that could have been pretty also. And then the next thing she did was to get out the kohl eyeliner, and so she is using the black version, and this is called Straight Line Kohl Eye Pencil. And so I do have the black version in this one, and so I did follow what she suggested. And she is not using this to draw a black line on the eyes, and rather she is using a very small eyeliner brush, and she is picking up a little bit of the product from this pencil, either by first putting it on her hand and then picking it up from there, or else putting the tip of the brush right on the tip of the pencil, and then using that to darken where the eyelashes are. And so she is not just painting a line on top of the eyelashes, but she is trying to actually drench the roots of the eyelashes so that there is not any differentiation between where the skin is and where the eyelashes are. And she said that that is a trick that she does mostly on older ladies, and that the reason for that is that if you put the pencil right on the skin, that it tends to look too severe, and especially if you're using a black shade, it looks too severe, but that if you use it with this brush method, that it looks really natural and really kind of smudged. And so I did give that a try, and usually I don't wear black eyeliner. Usually I do feel like it's too harsh for me. But with this application, I actually did really like the way that it looked. Now, I do think that it's the case that if you are using both her mascara method and then you're using this black eyeliner method, I do think that it's giving a darker look that is looking really, really natural, but it also is taking a considerable amount of time. And so I think that if you did both of these things, that would increase the amount of time that you're spending on your makeup to a significant extent, and it might be worth it. And I do like that look, but that is something to note. And then next she got out a product that is the eye polish, and this is one of those cream products that comes in a little jar, and it was fairly popular, but the issue with this particular product is that it did tend to crease and it didn't last very long on the eyes. And so what they tried to do with the Eyelight products was to create a version of these that looked somewhat similar and that lasted longer. And I don't actually think that they look that similar. I think that the Eyelights looked much more shimmery, almost metallic, and that these are a much softer shimmer that I think is more appropriate for me. I think it is the case that if I use it on my eyes that they don't last all that long. And I don't have the shades that they currently have. I have an older shade that is called Utopia. And for this particular look, she actually used this as a highlighter. And so even though she has a number of other highlighters, and even though there are a number of different highlighting steps that have already been included in this look, she decided to use a little bit more of this to put a little bit more highlighter onto the face. And so what she did with this is to put it sort of right along the higher cheekbone. And she said when you put it on that you should have a finger width between where the eye is and where the highlighter goes, so that it's not right next to the eye, because if it's too close to the eye, it'll look like you're tearing. So I would say that compared to her cream highlighters, this one is a bit more opaque. It has more of a white base to it, whereas the highlighters have more of a clear base, and so it's a slightly different look, but I do think it's a pretty look, and I kind of like it, using it as a highlighter. And then the next stage is blush, and so for that she is using their powder blush, and this is called the ReDimension Hydra Powder Blush, and these are hugely popular, and they are the same formula as that powder highlighter. It's not really a powder, it's actually a gel that is in solid form, and so you could put it on with your fingers, for instance, and it is not something that will break supposedly if you drop it, because it's actually not a powder. And so she chose the shade that is Cure Royale, and so this is a shade that is neutral with a little bit of a cool tone, she says, and so this is designed, I think, more for people with lighter skin tones or who want a blush that is not too dramatic. And so she put it right along the cheekbones, and the main thing that she seems to be stressing with regard to blush is that if you are getting older, you don't want to put any of it beneath the nostrils, because she thinks that this will drag the face down, and that the idea here is that your face look lifted. And these blushes, the powder blushes from RMS, these do have just a bit of luminosity in them, so it is similar to the bronzers. They all, and this highlighter, they all have just a very small amount of a shimmer in them that I do think is really, really pretty. And so with this one particular blush, you're getting some more highlights as well as the color. And this actually does have some moisturizing ingredients in it, so it's not like a powder that's going to dry out the face. It's actually providing more moisture to the skin. And then she suggested another shade of blush, and so I have both of these blush shades, and so I am using both of those myself. And that one is called Mai Tai, and she just put a bit on with her fingers, and that is one thing about these blushes, is that I think that they do go on very nicely with the fingers. And she said that this one has just a little bit of a golden shade to it. It's peach, it's Mai Tai, but it's just a little peach. And she said that it looks like you used an airbrush machine on the skin. And so she's putting a little bit of it on the discoloration under the eyes, and to kind of blend in between where the blush is and where the under eyes are, so that it looks like it's all flowing together and it doesn't look like you're wearing blush so much as just that you have a little bit of natural color. And then RMS also has a line of lip liners, and these are in mostly nude shades of different kinds. And I think that RMS really was one of the first companies to come out with nude lip liners, so I think that this is another product that Rosemary Swift was really a pioneer with regard to. And so her idea with this is that you want to line your lips so that they are like your lips were when they were younger, and that you have more of a little bit of border around your lips, and that will keep the lipstick staying on your lips rather than feathering out. And so she has a number of different shades, and the shade that I happen to have is called Sunrise Nude, and that is sort of a pink type of a shade, and I do think it's fairly close to the color of my lips, and so I did put that on my lips, and then I kind of pursed my lips a little bit to spread it out a bit. And then she put on some of her lipsticks, and so these were released last year or the year before, and they are called the Legendary Lipsticks. And so these are a serum lipstick, and they are in a tube where you can twist them up, and they don't twist back down, and you are not supposed to twist up very much of it because it is a very soft product and it will get all messy if you put it up too much. And so the idea here is that if you need a little bit, then you click it up 1 or 2 times, and then you just put it on really close to the container. And these actually are among the only lipsticks that I have found that do not have any silicones in them and that do not have any plastics in them. And so they are certainly a different kind of a texture than most of the lipsticks that I have in my collection. But I actually do really like them. And they are lipsticks that go on fairly bright or fairly dark, but that eventually wear down pretty quickly to just a pretty stain. And so the stain will last on the lips for quite a while after they wear off. And so Rosemary Swift is suggesting possibly using a lip brush to put on the lipsticks and to have that help the lipstick to go on really smoothly and not get caught in any fine lines that you may have on the lips. And she says that she likes to use a large brush for the lips, and so she has a brow brush that she actually uses. And so she says that she drenches the brush with the lipstick, and then she uses it to just fill in the lips. And she says that if you want to, you can use a little bit of powder on the edges of the lips, and this will also be something that will help to keep the lipstick from feathering. And she suggested the unpowder, which they do not have currently on their website. So if you have another powder that is a little bit on the oil-absorbing kind, then that might be one that would be a good one to try out with in terms of keeping the lipstick from feathering. And she did suggest that she thought that wearing a lipstick with some color in it was really important for people, especially as they get older. And she said that in some cases women may be too afraid to use a lipstick that is a fairly bright color because they think that it may emphasize the texture on their lips or that it may feather. But that nonetheless, that if you are getting to be older, that a lot of what happens on your face is that everything goes monochromatic and doesn't have very much contrast on it. And therefore, if you can add some color to the lips, then this will make you look a lot more youthful in terms of being flushed and having some differentiation on the face. And I tend to think that that is true. And when I first started to get into makeup a few years ago, I felt like I was a little bit uncomfortable when I put color on my lips. But over time, I have started to feel much more comfortable with it. And especially if I get good shades for me, then I think it is attractive. And when I was younger, I was mostly using nude-type lipsticks or lip balms. But I do feel like a little bit of color on my lips now is an attractive thing. And so personally for this step, I used a color of lipstick that is called Miranda, and that is a rose shade. And then Rosemary Swift's favorite sort of signature color for herself to wear is called Ruby Moon, and this is an orange red, and she has been wearing orange red lipsticks for a long time. And so when she came out with this line of lipsticks, she had this one made in her signature color. And Ruby Moon is her little dog, who is very, very cute. And the dog's initials are RMS also. And so this is a really bright color of orange red lipstick, and I think that for me it is a little bit on the bright side. But I do think it's important to know that with this lipstick you don't have to put on very much, and you can blot it out. And if you do that, it may still stay on your lips for quite a long period of time because it is a stain. And although most of their lip liners are nude, she does make a red lip liner to go with that red lip, and I don't have that particular product. But in any case, I think that oftentimes I do use a red lip liner when I have a red lip. And the only thing to be careful about is that if you are going to use a red lip liner, I tend to put a little bit of lip liner all over my lips and purse it together so that my whole lips have a little bit of lip liner on it, so that if the lipstick wears off, then I still have some color on my lips and it doesn't look like I just have a ring around my lips. That's a little bit strange. But in this case, I think that the fact that the RMS lipsticks will stain the lips, I think that that is a plus that maybe makes that a little bit less likely to be happening. And then the last thing that she did was to get out the ReDimension Luminizer again. And in this case, she used it like a finishing powder all over the face. And very lightly, but enough so that it looked like the whole face had just a little bit of shimmer to it. And what she suggested is that for an evening event, like a red carpet type of an event, that this would dress up the face a lot, and that rather than doing a heavy eye, a smoky eye, or a bright red lipstick or whatever, that if you just add a little bit of this shimmer to the face in general, that would look a little bit more dressy and a little bit more fun and be appropriate for more of an evening look. And I don't think I would do that during the day because it definitely would catch a lot of the sunlight rays, but I think that could be pretty for the evening, and so I did give that a try. So Glam Girl Gabby seemed to think that this style of makeup was really different than what she was already doing. I don't feel like it's all that much different in spirit than the way that I usually put on makeup. And so my goal in terms of putting on makeup is to really look like I am not wearing really any makeup at all, except maybe a nice lip or a pretty eye look, a fun eye look, and that I'm really trying to look better but not made up. And I think that is something that some of the other people, especially those who focus on high-end makeup for older women, that tends to be a look that is really attractive. And so I have mostly been focusing on listening to makeup artists like Bobbi Brown from Jones Road and Gucci Westman from Westman Atelier. And then I have listened to Rosemary Swift a lot in the past. And I do think that these looks are really, really pretty for me, and that they are working better than the way that most people, I think, on YouTube do makeup. And the way that they were describing it as being softer and less defined and more moisture-loving and more modern. And personally, I think that the thing that I learned from this makeup tutorial that I hadn't focused on before is how many layers she put on. And so it's not just put on, one layer of foundation, one layer of highlighter, and then you're done, but it seems to be much more sophisticated and multi-layered than that. And so she will put on a little bit of coverage, and then a little bit of powder, and then a little bit more coverage, and everything has a little bit of moisture in it. And she's also put on a whole bunch of different layers of things that have shimmer in them. And none of them are super shimmery, and she's not putting on very much of any of these products. But at the end, I think that you're getting a look that is looks like it's hydrated, and it looks like it's fresh, but it doesn't look like it's super shimmery, and it doesn't look like there's any differentiation, and you can't see any lines on there. And so I think that is a really interesting way to put on makeup that I hadn't focused on so much before, and that I wouldn't have really thought of putting on that many layers. With her products, they all are natural ingredients. They don't have silicones in them, and so therefore they all work together. Whereas with certain other lines, I think you might not be able to do that as well. And so with some makeup products, if you put a powder on top of a cream or a cream on top of a powder, that might not work all that well because they are not meant to be used like that. But that with these products having more natural ingredients, that they all seem to work together really well. And I do think that's the case. And so that makes me feel even more optimistic about these products than in the past. And I think that the people that are suggesting that these products are not very sophisticated, that they're really not understanding how to use the products maybe. And especially when we're talking about people that are getting older and that have lines, I think that this method works really, really well, in my opinion. And so now let's move on and talk about Crystal Slipper. And so Crystal Slipper is a shade that was developed to be part of their blush line. And this is described as a sheer sun-kissed buff. And so originally it was just in the powder blush, and now there is a cream blush, a cream highlighter, one of the shimmery Eyelights shades, and then a lip gloss. And my own feeling is that Crystal Slipper is actually one of my favorite shades of blush at all, and certainly it's the one from the RMS line that I use the most. And I think that if I am trying to get a makeup look that is very close to my own skin tone and that does look really pretty and natural looking, but that like a better version of myself, that this is a very good shade for me. And I do have skin that is quite peach, and I talked about that in my last video, the one on the Natasha Denona foundation. And so I think that this shade, which does have kind of a peachy brown color, I think that this is a particularly good one. And so I did some swatches first and did some comparisons. And so first of all, you can take a look at all of the Crystal Slipper shades in the different products in comparison to one another. And so one thing I want to say first is that when I first got the Crystal Slipper Luminizer and the Crystal Slipper in the Lip to Cheek, I felt like those products were almost the same. And certainly in the container, they look very, very similar. And when I swatched them on my arm, they do look slightly different. The one with the Luminizer is more like glassy type of a finish, and the one with the Lip to Cheek is less glassy and a little bit more conventional blush, but both of them do have shimmer in them. The Luminizer one has a little bit more shimmer, but they definitely go together, and whether or not you would need to have both of them, I don't know. It really depends on how much you want to splurge. I think that you probably could get a fairly similar look if you just bought the Lip to Cheek product and then you put some other kind of a highlighter, like a glassy highlighter on the top of it, especially if it was kind of clear or didn't have too much pigment in it. So I don't think that everyone needs to buy both of those products in terms of getting a look that would be attractive and kind of similar to what I'm doing here. And then I did a comparison with some other famous nude powder shades from RMS. And so we have the Crystal Slipper ones, and then we have one that's called Maiden's Blush, which is in the powder blush, and that one is darker and I think slightly pinker. And then there is Beach Walk Betty, which is a bronzer shade, and that one is certainly darker, but I'm not sure that it's a lot different than the Crystal Slipper in terms of the undertone. I think that those seem to be fairly close together. And you can look at all of the other powder blushes that I have from RMS, which is almost all of them. And so those are all much brighter colors rather than nudes. And then I have a couple of slides with comparisons of all of the Lip to Cheek shades that RMS offers, so I do have all of those. And I do think that the Spell color is somewhat similar to the new Crystal Slipper color. I think that the Spell color is a little darker, and it also doesn't have the slight shimmer in it that the Crystal Slipper has. And since we're talking about blush, you can take a look at the shade Beloved. And so this is a famous red blush shade that Rosemary Swift developed. And I think that now there is a big red blush trend, but really everyone does seem to be giving credit for this red blush trend to Rosemary Swift. And so I thought that I would do a comparison slide with that Beloved with a few other red blush shades. And so the ones that I'm showing you are first the new Charlotte Tilbury Glow Blush. These are sticks. They just came out this year. And so the one that I have here is called Cherry Glow. And then there is one from Merit, which is called Rouge. And there's one from Tower 28. And then there's one that I thought was kind of red, and so I thought that I would swatch it. But this is from House Labs, and it's from their new versions that are kind of on the bronzy side. And so that one is called Lassie Cayenne, I think. And I do feel like the RMS one is just a touch more orange than some of these others. And then I have a slide that has all of the cream highlighter shades. And so I think that Crystal Slipper and Peach are quite similar in terms of the undertone, and that the Peach one is certainly much more dark, but that if, in terms of the look that you're going to get, if you shear out the Peach one, you can get something that's fairly close to Crystal Slipper. And then in the next slide, I put together all of the neutral cream products so you can compare them to one another. So there is the Crystal Slipper Lip to Cheek and the Crystal Slipper Luminizer, and then you can look at the Peach Luminizer and the Spell Lip to Cheek. And then the other product that I think is fairly similar is the Bariti Bronzer. And so let's take a look at the footage of me putting on these products. So first of all, I'm putting on the RMS Concealer. And again, I'm putting being fairly conservative in terms of how much I put on, and then may put on more layers. And then I am using the Sarah Creal Face Flex, and I have that in the shade 3.0, and that is a little bit dark for me, but I think that that may have been the best shade for me when that first came out in terms of the undertone. Now they have more products, and so I may choose a different one when I rebuy that product, and I do like it enough that probably I will rebuy it again during the Sephora sale or the end of the year sales, because I do really like that product, and I think that even though I also like the RMS one, I want to keep the Sarah Creal one on hand just from further comparisons. And so you can see what you think, but I feel like both of these sides look quite the same to me, both in person and in the video footage, and that even though I felt like the Sarah Creal one was really, really terrific when I first started using it, I feel like it's really not much different than the RMS one. And both of these two come from Italy, and I do wonder if maybe they come from the same factory. And then I am using again the RMS Hydra Setting Powder, and I feel like I am liking this product a lot more now that I am using Rosemary Swift's method of patting it in rather than using it with a brush. I do feel like I can use just a very, very small amount of the powder, and that it does take down the shine really easily, and that it's quite attractive. So before I had thought that this powder was okay, but it wasn't really my favorite. But I do think it must be designed to be applied with a puff, because it does work really, really well with this puff. And then I'm putting on a little bit of the RMS ReDimension Luminizer, which is again in that powder form. And I think, as I said before, that it's tempting to think that this product is doing nothing, but I kind of agree with her that using it in the eye area, especially to kind of damp down the discoloration, that's actually working surprisingly well. And then I am putting on the Jones Road Brow Pencil. And I do think that by this point my face is looking a lot better. I'm not wearing any color cosmetics, and it doesn't really look like I'm wearing any makeup at all. But I do feel like my face is looking a lot fresher and prettier, and I'm kind of impressed by how well these products are working. And then I thought that I would put the RMS Lip to Cheek in the Crystal Slipper on one cheek, and that on the other cheek I would put the RMS Luminizer in the color Crystal Slipper. And so again, I think that both of these are very similar to one another, except that the Luminizer is a bit more glassy, and so you can take a look and see what you think. I think that both of these do have a substantial amount of color, but that it is very neutral, and that on the lip to cheek side you're getting a little bit more of a cream blush type of a look rather than a glassy type of a look. And then I have the new Eyelights, and so on one of my eyes I am just putting the Eyelights directly down. I did put some concealer down on my eyelids, but then I'm putting the RMS Eyelights directly down on one side and just using that as a one and done eyeshadow. And then on the other side I am using the matte version in the color Wildflower, and that one is a very, very light purple that has a lot of white in it, and so I'm using that as a base, and I think it's very pretty. Again, not everyone can tolerate that particular eyeshadow, but I think that as a very, very light lilac type of a shadow, I think it's kind of pretty. But I did end up putting some of that Crystal Slipper Eyelights on the top of it, and I actually don't think that those look too much different from one another. I think that the Crystal Slipper one, it looks very ethereal, but it actually has enough opacity to it that I think if you put it over something that you don't really see what's underneath it. And I would say that at least on my skin that this seems to be a really different kind of Eyelights product than the other ones that I've tried. So I feel like the other ones that I've tried have been very, very shiny, and that this one is very neutral looking, and it doesn't even necessarily look like I'm wearing any substantial amount of eyeshadow at all, or maybe even any eyeshadow at all. And so I tend to think that the previous versions of the Eyelights, that they were very, very shiny and very metallic and something that I didn't feel necessarily comfortable wearing every day. Now, I think if you just use a tiny little bit of it as a highlighter like Rosemary Swift did on Gabby's eyes, that might be a little bit of a different story. But I think that for this one, you can use it just on its own and on an everyday basis, and it just looks pretty. So that's a kind of a good thing to know. And then I put on a little bit of that mascara. I managed to wait until later on in the process, which is not, I guess, how Rosemary Swift is suggesting it, but I did try to put it on the same way as before. And then I'm just putting a little bit more of the lip to cheek on both of my cheeks so that they will both look the same. And then I am putting just a little bit of Luminizer over the top of it, and so you can see what the whole look looks like when both of those products are used together in a substantial way. And then I am using the same Go Nude lip pencil in the color that I have, which is called Sunrise Nude, which is a pink color. And I'm trying a little bit of the lip oil in the crystal slipper just right over that lip pencil. And I think that this is almost a neutral lip color. It has very little color in it. It's just a little tiny bit of a hint of a brownie peach color. And I feel like when I do it this way and when I stop at this point that it really looks like I'm not wearing any makeup at all. And personally, I think that that's kind of a good thing. A lot of the people in the area where I live don't really wear makeup. And so if I put on a full face of obvious makeup, then I do feel like I am really overdone and standing out. But when I wear makeup like this, I do feel like I look a lot better, but that people don't really realize that I'm wearing makeup, and that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And then next I'm trying on all of the lip oils that I have from RMS. And so the first shade is called Carolina, and that is described as a soft bubblegum pink. And I think it is a slightly blue color, but it is very pretty, and I feel like I can wear it. It's not too leaning cool. And then the second one is called Lucia, and that one is described as a sweet buttercream pink, and I think that's more of like a neutral pink. But on my lips, it really doesn't look that much different. These are fairly sheer. And then the next one is called Elle, and this is described as a perfectly pink grapefruit, and that one's a little bit warmer. And then the next one is Milla, and that one is described as a deep sugary plum. I think that's more like a brown berry. The next one is Lily, and that one is described as a sour cherry red. And then the other shades are Amber, which is a rosy caramel, and Alessandra, which is a bright pop-up boysenberry, and Adriana is a sheer crystal shimmer. And I do really like these lip oils very, very much. That is why I have several of them. I do think that they taste good to me. They feel good to me. I like the way that they apply. For the most part, I feel like they put an appropriate amount of the lip oil on my lips without my needing to redo it, or without their putting on so much of it that it makes like a mess. And one thing that they have is a kit that is called the Lip Oil To Go set, and that one has 3 lip oils in a little case. And so the case is bright red, and it has a keychain on it, and then it has a couple of little charms. And then I'm trying on 2 more of the Legendary lipsticks. So one of those is Pamela, which is a deeply seductive berry bitten nude, and that is a cool shade. And then the next one is called Eve, and this is one of my favorite colors. This is in their neutrals line, and it is described as being a natural rosy red nude. So I do think it gives a little bit of a look of wearing red lipstick, but it's very muted, and it looks a lot more natural than a lot of red lipsticks do. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you have tried any RMS products, then I hope you will tell me what you have thought of them. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And if you like this video, then I hope you will hit like, because supposedly that helps the algorithm. And then also, again, if you are interested, then I hope you will come and join my Facebook group, which is called 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Peterson. And so thank you very much for watching, and Coco and I love you very much. Goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-ba.
La ba do la 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 boom boom.